Because people ask, they're like, how do you know if it's working? But that was also surprising to me too. And this guy was like, no, don't need it. Don't want it. He eventually got on board. Product managers make the decisions. Product operations enables those decisions. Engineers think about the what. Everyone thinks about the when. Just tell me how to do it and I will do it.
Welcome to the Productized podcast, where we explore the minds of the most innovative entrepreneurs and leaders in product management and design.
Take the opportunity to learn more about product topics from over 25 speakers and trainers at our upcoming Productized Conference 2024 in Lisbon, October 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Tickets with summer discount are now available at www.productized.co. and they will be available until the end of the month. So we hope to meet you there. Today, my guest is Denise Tilles. She's the Chief Product Officer and founder at Grocket. Denise is also the co-author of the book Product Operations, alongside Melissa Perri. She supports companies like Bloomberg, Sam's Club, and athenahealth to enable meaningful outcomes by strengthening capabilities in product operations, product strategy, organizational design, and product operating models. Denise has an impressive track record, having worked across various domains, various industries, such as healthcare, life sciences, fintech, martech, media, real estate, philanthropy, and nonprofit. Denise, welcome to the Productized podcast.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here.
Great. So let's get started. But, before we do the dive in, let's just do a couple of questions. We usually try to make those questions really quick. You don't have to think a lot, so don't overthink too much about it. What's your favorite app right now?
I think I would have to say Lyft, and I'll tell you why. I've been speaking at conferences, about 4 conferences so far this year. And I love that I'm able to switch back and forth quickly from my business credit card to my personal credit card. So it's been especially helpful and a lot easier than Uber. Do you guys have Lyft in Portugal?
No, we don't have Lyft, but we have an Estonian clone of Uber called Bolt.
Oh, yes.
And
Okay.
I'm not sure if they also operate in the US, but Bolt is great.
Yeah. So that's my go-to right now.
Yeah. So what's your favorite summer activity?
You're going to laugh. It's been so hot right here in New York City where I live. It's been, 100 degrees Fahrenheit and really humid. I'm sure that doesn't seem so bad for you in Portugal. I'm sure it gets hot there. But what I love doing is being inside in the air conditioning and watching Love Island. We have the UK and the US going on right now simultaneously. So it's a commitment. That's what I'm enjoying.
All right. Love Island it is.
Yes.
Well, at least it's AC.
Exactly. Get to hang out with my dog and, watch real things.
All right. Okay. So it's summer, right? I think everybody takes it easier.
Exactly.
All right, so let's actually start. Denise, your career in product management has been filled with achievements. I mean, I've been through your LinkedIn. You have lots of very impactful contributions. Could you start by sharing a bit about your journey? What inspired you to found Grocket, the consulting company?
Yeah, it's just been a series of sort of great circumstances and luck. I actually trained as a journalist and started out in that career and eventually worked for a big media company called Condé Nast. They publish Vogue and The New Yorker, a couple of big magazines, and
big group.
Working there as a digital strategist. And one day my boss came to me and said, "Oh, you're a product manager now." Okay, cool. And I'm like, what is this? What is product management? So learned definitely on the job. And
were you the very first product manager, or did you have other people?
My team? I mean, it was a big team, but yeah, for sure. And so helping the companies sort of understand too, where they were slow to understand how to transform to digital from print to digital, helping them understand what product management was even tougher. So we all sort of learned together. So wasn't a lot of information about it back then, and it was like the early 2000s, about 2006, 2007. And that's I sort of learned on the job. And then as I went to each job, learned a little bit more. After I left Condé Nast, I went to work for a marketing tech martech company called Cision, and that's where I think I got really so much experience as a sort of a full stack product manager, that
Mm-hmm.
I had access to revenue data, which formerly at my other company it was privately held, no access to revenue. That's like doing product with your arm tied behind your back, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, how do I interpret this? What does this mean to the work we're doing? So I found a really great CFO who was very open to teaching me, and it was pretty transformative for my career and my skill set, understanding how revenue really plays into product management. And that sort of was my first experience with product operations there too.
Mm-hmm. And that eventually led you to found the consulting that you are in at the moment. Is it because you found that there was this niche that required you to address, or what was the rationale really
That's a
behind
good
it?
question. In 2018, I started working with Melissa Perri at her consultancy Products Labs, and
Mm-hmm.
that was kind of a revelation for me, because I'm like, this is great. This is taking what my experience, what I've learned, but also teaching and guiding. And I was like, I really love this. How did I not discover this before? Um, Fast forward to 2021, Melissa wanted to focus on teaching at Harvard, so she dissolved the consulting aspect of Products Labs. And I thought, I'll try it on my own. So it was just kind of like these happy circumstances that you sort of, if you stay open to it, usually good things come. And yeah, there was definitely a need. And as I worked with more companies like Bloomberg, it was like, yeah, a lot of companies have this need, a more humanistic approach of not like, here's how it's done, but let me meet you where you are and figure out what good looks like for your company, as opposed to one standard of good everywhere. So that was my initial foray into sort of advising and consulting and coaching, solopreneur.
Mm-hmm. And what were some of the challenges you faced early on, and how did you overcome them? I guess when you started as a consultant, um, of course, you had this huge backlog of the work you have been doing before, but have to acquire clients. You
Yeah.
have all these big accounts like Bloomberg. I guess they don't come that easy. What were really the challenges that you faced early on?
I think trusting that it would build, and not being worried that what next quarter would look like. And luckily,
Mm-hmm.
things have built really well. But I think just initially the unknown, because you're working for yourself, which has so many different um, advantages, but the disadvantages. Luckily, I have a husband who's got a steady job and health insurance, big deal in the United States. So I had that sort of safety net, which was good. So I think it was just trusting that it would build, and it did.
Mm-hmm. What was the best rewards of starting your own consultancy?
Oh gosh. Well,
Is it the
besides,
freedom that you have to
yeah,
decide how to steer the ship? Is that, you know?
that's it. That's exactly it. I
Mhm.
have my day blocked off at 4 o'clock so I can walk my dog. I figure out when I want to have my meetings, when I don't. So I think it's the freedom of scheduling. Um, the flip side of that is the freedom to work 7 days a week when you need to. But then, I'm coming to the end of an engagement on Monday with a client. I'm like, okay, what not work things am I going to do? So it's been nice. I've been able to have more free time, which makes me sharper and better when I am in my engagements. And I think being able to pick and choose what you want to do versus like, here's a client that's really tough and they don't know what they want, go. I can sort of get a sense, would these be good partners to work with? Can I help them? Are they open to transformation too? So I think that's been really great. I love it.
Yeah, and I guess a big part of the consultancy you're doing at the moment involves or resolves also a lot about setting up product operations and
Mhm.
how to do it. So, how did you get into the whole product operations thing, and how does it came out this idea to write this book together with Melissa Perri on, the book. It's called Product Operations. I have it here. So, you know, that I think the book is maybe 1 year now, maybe less
Not
than one
even,
year. I think the
yeah.
book's like, yeah, 10 months,
Yeah,
right?
10 months,
So
right.
how does it yeah, how did it come to your life?
My
How
product operations. So the company I
Yeah.
mentioned earlier where I had access to revenue, Cision,
Mhm.
when I first started there, my SVP of product was like, "Hey, do you want a data analyst?" I'm like, "You can have that."
Mm.
So I was like, "Yeah, of course I do." And we started talking and what this role could be. And I ended up hiring someone from my former job who was very overqualified. And she sort of created this small team. And looking back, it was product operations. And I'll tell you why. Had a team of 10 product managers, and we had lots of data, almost too much data. And
Mm.
if I could even say that, engagement data, revenue data. And so, how do you find the needle in the haystack? How do you find the so what in that? And this team was really helpful. They understood our products innately, but they had a bit of a more objective remove from the, when you're in it, is sometimes you can't see what the data is telling you. So they're like, hey, this looks like an opportunity. I'm concerned about what we're seeing here. So it was just more leverage in terms of a view, a point of view of where our products could go and the opportunities. And one thing that came out of it was a potential product that could add yield to the customer spend, so increasing the spend of current customers. And it was an add-on product to what we did, and we had it as a sort of beta back of the pocket product, not on the rate card, not really in the website, and it made $1 million the first year. So I was like, "Oh, this works." I mean, we didn't have anything else as successful as that after that, but I was like, "This is pretty powerful." And then fast forward, meeting Melissa in 2019, she mentioned something about product operations. I'm like, "Wait, what's that?" And she explained it and talked
Mhm.
about, you know, business and data insights, customer and market insights, process and practice, the operating model. I was like, "Wait a minute, we were doing some of that." And then started to work with her more on that and helping companies with standing up product operations. And in 2021, when I went on my own, I slacked her. I'm like, "Why has nobody written a book about this? I'm thinking about doing this. That's crazy, right?" And
Mhm.
she's like, "No, no, I think it's a good idea." I said, "Well, why don't you write it with me?" Then I didn't get a response. I think she had to think about it. And I think, having written Escaping the Build Trap, was
Yeah,
she
it's
ready
quite
to do that again? Probably a little
exactly.
post-traumatic stress disorder, but
Mm.
she agreed pretty quickly. And it was a great project. It took 2.5 years. And she was in Brooklyn, and then she moved to South Carolina during the pandemic. So
Yeah.
we were working completely, separately. And it was good to have that partner of accountability and getting stuff done. I've never written a book before, so I don't know what it's like solo, but she said it was better for her just to be able to have someone to bounce off of, and again, that accountability. So it was just surprising to me that nobody had written it, and had a little bit of time during the pandemic in addition to the clients. So we started that, and then we published it in October of 2023.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And this is a self-published book, or
Yeah.
did you It
Yep.
is, right?
And she had gone
So,
through, that was another advantage of writing this with her. She had gone through publishing with a publisher.
yeah.
And she thought there were a lot of advantages to self-publishing. And, there's pros and cons to each thing,
Mhm.
but
Mhm. Mhm.
it's given us a lot of freedom.
All right. So, a lot of things have happened. I think, 10 months have passed since you published the book. So,
Yeah.
inside, I had your company. You specialize in enabling meaningful outcomes for companies through mostly product strategy and transformation, right?
Hmm.
How do you define a successful product strategy, and what elements are crucial for its development under, this framework of, I don't know, implementing product ops somehow,
Hmm.
or how does it play out? Yeah, what is, your framework to approach some of this business and product transformational challenges that you're facing?
Right. My approach is one that's very specific and people can understand whatever level you're at in the company, how you plug into that. So I'll tell you what I mean. Just to sort of define product strategy, it's like system of achievable goals and visions work together to align the teams around the outcomes you want to get to towards business and for the customers. I like the way that Melissa has structured that from escaping the build trap and thinking about sort of layers, right? So, vision, strategic intent, product initiatives, solutions. And with those layers, you can be very specific about where people plug in and what their role is. So I've always found that really accessible. And I think strategy is a hard thing to define for people. And having these layers help people understand, oh, I fit in here. Oh, this is how I can actually ladder up the sprint I'm planning to all the way up to the vision. So
Mhm.
that is my take on that. Very, very aligned with Melissa's. And your question was, what does success look like?
Yes. I guess when you're starting this, there's several questions that leaders inside these companies they have when they
Mhm.
have Grocket come in and help them define a strategy. So maybe a question could be, what kind of strategies have you found most effective in fostering innovation within these organizations?
What kind of strategies?
Yeah, in terms of the practice that you're doing,
Mhm.
what is your go-to framework that you found most effective? Is this Melissa's Perri pyramid, vision, strategic intent,
Yeah, that's
solutions?
exactly it, those
Right.
layers. And we mentioned that in the book as well. And I think
Hmm.
that accessibility of everyone understanding where they play within the strategy is more inclusive because it's not just someone setting it at the top. People understand sort of how it cascades down and how it rolls back up. So that's typically the way I like to help people think through it. And oftentimes, companies I'll work with have sort of a vision and then they have solutions. And there's
Hmm.
this
So there's
missing middle,
missing
right?
middle.
Yeah. So within the strategic intent and the product initiative. So sometimes highlighting it visually for them, like, oh, I get that, as opposed to just be strategic, right? So helps them understand how to frame it.
And who are you working with inside the organization? Who is your go-to
Mm.
customer inside
Mhm.
the organization? Is it the head of product? Is it, you know, who is it? Who is this person?
Yeah. For strategy, it's typically the head of product or the VP of product. Um, Typically, the folks I've worked with around that are at large companies, so they're trying to figure out within their division what that looks like
Hmm.
and how to formulate it, how to deploy it, and then how to help people understand where they fit in.
Hmm. So
Because maybe
you
they
get
put, oh, go ahead.
no, you get to touch several stakeholders inside the company. So it's the head
Absolutely.
of product, and then a number of people working within that organization that end up being touched by the consultancy that you do with them.
Yeah, exactly. I might start with them. They might reach out to me. They may say, I'm having trouble formulating a strategy. And then we may have a session or two one on one talking about what they think it is, what their hunch is, and then how do we pull in the inputs to create an informed strategy with quantitative and qualitative data, making sure they have that. And then once they have sort of a good V1 draft of that, bringing in the rest of the team to sort of kick the tires, so to speak, and figure out does this make sense? How do we plug in? What do sort of the elements that cascade down look like? And then everyone feels a part of that as well.
And what are some of the common challenges you encounter when you help, companies doing this
Yeah.
product transformation
So
or
sometimes it's the
product strategy?
foundational, unsexy stuff like, hey, we don't have data instrumented, or we don't really have
Mm,
any user research. And unfortunately, you can try to put quick views together, but eventually you're going to have to get that enabled. So
mhm,
sometimes it's those foundationals that aren't available to make
mhm.
those strategies. And you can take a stab at it, but you really do need to have those inputs to make sure that you're setting an informed strategy. So not having those inputs enabled, I would say, is a common challenge.
How do you navigate those? Do you have like a go-to tool set, say, okay, let's make sure that this is set, foundations are here, so we can enable the rest of the process.
I think it's about maybe doing a quick gap analysis and understanding sort of like what is here, what can we make of it, what are the gaps, and are these nice to have or must haves?
Hmm.
And then understanding like, does this exist at the company? Maybe they've just never accessed it. So asking some sort of um, thought-provoking questions about, do you have these types of inputs? Would that live with the CFO? Would that live with data science? And then helping them piece that together, because oftentimes they're so busy, or maybe they've got annual planning coming up or quarterly planning coming up very soon, and they're pretty um, rushed to put this together. So sometimes it's not like, we can do this, we can do it quickly, but let's just understand what we do have available today, and then also make a recommendation of like, okay, we got through this planning season. Here's what I recommend that you stand up, just as like table stakes must have, and then what could be better in building that up. So that's typically the challenge I see in how we sort of work through that, because
Hmm.
the chances are you probably have a deadline, right? So you
Hmm.
can't stop and set up a whole amplitude system or something like that.
Right.
So you got to work with what you have.
Hey, summer adventurers, we hope your summer is as bright as today's episode. Before we get back into our fascinating discussion, we've got some exciting news to share. Do you want to elevate your product management skills? Then don't miss the Productized Conference 2024 happening from October 2nd to the 4th. It's going to be epic. Imagine this: top-notch workshops, insights from industry leaders, and a vibe that's bursting with innovation. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. So while you're enjoying the summer breeze in this episode, make sure to grab a ticket. We've got a fantastic summer sale offering 20% off, but only until July 31st. All access tickets are nearly sold out, so act fast. And let's create unforgettable moments in Lisbon at Productized 2024. See you there.
And how do you measure success? How do you measure if the product strategy transformation has been successful? What kind of metrics or KPIs do you typically focus or negotiate with
That's a good
whoever is hiring
question,
you?
because people ask that, like, how do you know if it's working? There's a couple of ways I think that are really good signals that tell you that. I look at it a number of ways. Obviously, revenue. Can you tie a direct through line from what you decided on focusing strategically to where the revenue showed up? And does that come by quarter? Is it a half year mark or a full year mark? So that's more of a lagging indicator. I like to see really about the innovation experimentation, because if people know where they're going, they have a little more headspace to be able to think, oh, I can actually do some experimentation. If we're going towards this goal, this strategic point of view, then we can actually do some testing and experimenting. So I'd love to see more of that happening, sort of based on the data and feedback and driven by that product strategy. So what I might look for is like uh, experiments and sort of the insights that have come out of that. What is that insights to action rate? So if you've generated, let's say, 6 insights from an experiment, where 50% of those implementable, and then measuring that, right? So then tying the actions to business and customer outcomes. And then the last thing would be not quite so lagging, but looking at R&D allocations. And I see this a lot with companies where they either don't monitor it, and they're like, well, why aren't we fulfilling our strategy? And when you do finally look at it, you're like, oh, interesting. We said we were going towards X strategy, but it looks like the work that the teams did actually was 30% of toward that strategy. And then the other 70% was all kinds of stuff: sales requests, bugs you have to do, sales requests you have to do. But if it throws off, your plan by 70%, you've got to wonder. So having the visibility into R&D allocations and looking at that 3, 6 month, 12 months, what's that increase in percentage of work aligned towards the strategy versus last year? So typically companies will come to that point where like, 30% of our work only contributed towards that. How do we get more aligned? So then you've got that as the baseline. And then qualitatively would be retention. of product
Mhm.
managers. A big frustration they have is like, we don't know where we're going. We don't know what the vision and strategy is here. So they're going to stick around. They're more satisfaction in terms of understanding where to spend their time and how to prioritize. That's a frustrating thing. Not if the ground keeps moving, you don't know what you should be focusing on. So retention, and that teams understand qualitatively how to align their sprint level work to the strategy, and that helps them prioritize. So those would be a couple of ways I think you could get an indication that your strategy's
Mhm.
working and on and the right path.
Okay. So alignment and how close you are to the defined strategy. So let's maybe start diving into product operations
Okay.
and in your upcoming workshop at Productized 2024,
Yeah.
which is titled From One to Zero Standing Up Product Operations. You'll be guiding attendees on how to establish product operations without adding new hires, which I think obviously is very
It's
important.
0 to
So
1.
yes, 0 to 1. So
Yeah.
how does product operation actually differs from traditional product management, and what kind of unique challenges does it address?
So it's really about enabling the product managers, right? It's a partnership. They're not usurping, they're not supplanting, they're not taking over. It's about a partnership, and they're almost the product manager for the product managers, right?
Hmm.
So the unique challenges it addresses is really helping product managers focus on the things they were hired for, right? Generating revenue, working well with stakeholders, really focusing on customer outcomes. A lot of companies I end up working with, their product teams have been writing SQL scripts because they don't have access to data. Um,
Hmm.
Kind of reinventing the wheel every time they get ready to do road mapping or setting up
Hmm.
roadmaps, or roadmaps are really misaligned in terms of how they're expressed, right? One might be a wish list, one might be really organized in terms of um, resource allocation, another may be expressed by features, another by customer values. So that is often a challenge, and product operations help sort of create those. Um, Simplifying the ways of working so we don't spend cycles talking about how we're working, but we can get to do the work. So that's how I would sort of explain that. And I teach a master class quarterly on product operations, and I show sort of examples and what product management does and what product operations does. And the bottom line is really about product managers make the decisions, product operations enables those decisions.
All right. So product ops has an enabler
Yeah.
for the team, but uh, I think that a lot of the, I wouldn't say confusion, but
Mhm.
the fact that it's still a rather new term, lots of companies are giving it either first steps or just discovering what is the role of the ops. So can you share the importance of this collaboration between product management, engineering, and other important departments, data, etc., in establishing effective product operations?
Yeah. Product operations really does help show up, I think, as you mentioned, in that sort of triad, right? If we don't have core artifacts, and I'm a big fan of less is more. Companies I've worked with might have like 6 versions of very similar products at different documents people have to create throughout the
Hmm.
product development life cycle. It's like, how do we bring that down, but make sure it's actually effective and helps inform engineers, sort of the
Hmm.
who and the why. Engineers think about the what. Everyone thinks about the when. So it's about helping product managers get their ducks in a row, right? So when we are collaborating with engineering, things are we there's a consistency, there's a predictability of ways of working, and especially at companies that have shared resources, different developers on different projects. There's this context switching of like, wait a minute, I thought we did planning this way, or we're doing um, estimations. This person doesn't. So it's kind of like having to
Right.
relearn all of that. So it sort of helps create that consistency where you're not sort of redeciding how we work together. Everyone understands, and
Right.
it sort of makes that clarity.
And
Yeah,
how do you manage this tension of different product managers or different product PMs having different visions on, let's say, practical example, estimations are being done or the way the roadmap should be managed, right? And then, if of course, you have different silos, so then the product ops would have to have this minimum common denominator approach, which is, oh, let's maybe go this way, but then you'll still have lots of people saying, no, no, we really don't want to do it this way, we want to keep doing it our way.
yeah,
So what are the best in class or best practices, approaches that you would recommend to manage this tension, which I guess it's also good to have some kind of tension,
yeah.
that means that people have different opinions, and that's not necessarily a different, bad thing. But how do you manage this trade-off of PMs having a little bit less freedom in exchange of having more leverage, having more power
Mhm.
and more capabilities to do their work?
I'm going to push back on the thought of having less freedom. Many of the product managers I've worked with are dying for, they want this structure. They're tired
Mm-hmm.
of thinking about how, they don't want to think about, do I do my roadmap in PowerPoint? Do we need a tool? Do I have to be the person to sort of suggest this and own this and shepherd this through? They're thrilled. Just tell me how to do it and I will do it. So,
Mm-hmm.
certainly I have worked with companies where some product teams, um, I was helping introduce and stand up product operations at a large retailer in the US here. And I thought they would be so excited. And the CPO had me meet with his heads of the divisions. And one of them was like, I don't need this. I have my act together. Those are the other
Yeah.
teams. So I was like, oh, that was surprising to me. And so I thought, well, let's see what you're doing. What can we learn? And how can we leverage what's working within this company, within the other teams? How can we sort of take that playbook and roll that across the others, and adjust as we need? So, but that was also surprising to me too, because I assumed everybody would be so excited. And this guy's like, no, don't need it, don't want it. He eventually got on board. But yeah, there's going to be folks that are like, I have my way of doing things. But if you're at a large company, billions, it's kind of naive to think that there wouldn't be this sort of structure in place. And
Yeah.
when I got to this company, the CPO had no portfolio visibility. That's
Mm.
crazy,
That's
right?
crazy.
You have to have, they were reconstructing that every quarter for the quarterly business reviews. That's not
So, in your
sustainable.
view, what are really the long term benefits of investing in product operations, especially for companies looking to scale or innovate?
Yeah. I love that you mentioned innovate too. So for scaling, it's establishing that operating model before you sort of hit that inflection of major growth. And that's sort of when you're on a horse and you're trying to stay on top and not fall off, right? So that's not the time to figure out, oh, we're going to do road mapping this way. We've got to get there. You've got a really aggressive revenue number to meet. So, how do we get set up so as we do grow, when PMs start, they understand, here are the ways we work in terms of discovery, research. Here's the data that's available. Here's the tools that we use. Here's our tool tech stack. So, onboarding, I think, is a huge piece of it. And, I think teams underestimate and undervalue onboarding at their own peril. It's super important, I think, just in terms of setting the tone for someone new at the company, but also you're going to get more out of them sooner versus them kind of finding their way in the dark of how to do things. And I see that happen a lot at companies. So I think onboarding is a huge thing. You're going to get velocity out of product managers faster, that satisfaction of like, wow, this place doesn't know what the hell they're doing. But it's like, oh, they've got it together, and here's how I sort of slot in and get going. So I think that's huge. And I think in terms of having that aligned portfolio view for your CPO, if they get in a meeting with the CEO and they don't know what's going on within their team, that's not good. So, and they should
Yeah.
have that at their fingertips, not scrambling to get that manually every quarter. So, sometimes you have to have a little more structure. So someone who's got, almost 1,000 product managers knows what's going on. That's just how it's got to be. Um, And I guess the last, there's many benefits, but making sure the product managers have what they need to make faster and better quality decisions, right?
Hmm.
So some of that is the structure and the way we work, but a lot others is like, do they have the data? And that seems obvious. I'm working with a company right now. They have 5 data teams, and it's
Yeah.
product managers can't get access to data. Or if there's one team, product is the last team to eat, so to speak. Your executive team, your sales team, they're ahead of you in line. They're going to eat first. So how do we leverage existing resources? The product operations doesn't create the assets. They're making sure they're harnessing it. So if you've got 1,000 product managers, they can't all be hitting up the same data team. Who's figured out from in its product operations what the teams need, how to put that into practice without overwhelming your data team, your
Hmm.
user research team. So I think that is a big piece of it. Product managers actually focusing on the things they were hired for, which I mentioned earlier.
Which I understand, it's great if you have a very big company. What is the rationale behind product ops for smaller companies, if there is any?
It's surprising. Some companies folks I've met, companies I've worked with, they have 3 product managers and product ops. So I was like, that's a pretty amazing ratio. So they saw the
Exactly.
value. And one of them was a 6 PMs, and they wanted to add another product ops person. I'm like, okay, if you can make the case. I don't know that I would see it as a necessity, but fine. I think it's completely dependent on the situation. And if you feel like it will give your product managers better leverage, it will help create more synergy with your close functional partners, like engineering and design. Great, but I couldn't say to you like if you have 6 PMs, no way. It really depends on
Hmm.
the context.
Yeah, I guess some of the companies that I've been to, either consulting or
Hmm.
closer to, there's always one product manager that is a little bit more tech savvy, or he or she actually likes
Yeah,
to, go into SQL, or they don't mind
yeah,
learning like the last trick of the language, whatever it is. And they tend to be kind of an official product ops, or
yep,
the product ops that nobody is calling product ops, but they are the go-to guy.
yeah.
Hey, I need this, and somehow they find a way. But yeah, I totally see what you're saying. What would you say it's a good ratio, it's a sane ratio to have then? 1 to
Uh,
10, 1 to 20?
yeah, I mean, whatever you can afford, right? I'd
Mm-hmm.
rather teams underhire, make the case, get some quick wins, and then talk about what's above the line in terms of capabilities they can support and what's below the line. If we do grow the team, here's what additional capability we could expect to add and the leverage it will give to product managers. So a clear view of that. So yeah, I would say anywhere from 1 to 10, 1 to 20. Spotify had one person for their whole product team,
Oh, wow.
and that's hundreds. And she was laid off in December with that massive layoff.
Hmm.
So it depends on the um, way that the CPO views supporting the PMs. It depends on the
Hmm.
way the CEO views supporting the CPO. And a lot of chief product officers I know won't take a role if it doesn't have product operations or they can't implement it because they've
Right.
seen the leverage and they don't want to go back.
Going to this, I mean, not necessarily the specific example of Spotify, but to the fact that product ops might be seen, or could be seen as, you know, kind of a luxury, or kind
Mhm.
of a perk for the product managers, or
Mm.
the first one in a line if there's a layoff, right? How do you tackle this kind of argument that that's not necessarily the case?
Yeah, yeah. I did a talk at Product Led Alliance's Product Operations Summit a couple months ago about leaner times and why product operations is more important than ever. And that as you're trimming, you need even more, you have even stronger need to understand what your portfolio is happening, what your resources, where the allocations are, how is change management being handled? If you're trimming teams, there are going to be holes. How are the PMs sort of adjusting if they don't have access to an individual data analyst anymore? Um, Product operations think about, all right, how can we sort of operationalize data at a bigger scale versus the more bespoke way they were doing it? So it's about helping the teams leverage with fewer resources. So I think it's even more important to have a better sense of, the product portfolio view. If resources in terms of, data inputs have been reduced, helping the teams understand, what the new world looks like and adjusting to that and setting up, enablement for that. So short-sighted to get rid of product operations. But as in the book, we say at the end of the day, product operations is a cost center, right? They're not generating
Hmm.
revenue. So how do you avoid being on the chopping block?
Exactly.
Yeah. And our friend Annabella Cesario, she
Hmm.
made, a great story in terms of showing value at OutSystems, and helping them understand why product operations was so important. So I think you have to be proving your value every day, sharing that back, making sure people understand what we do and the value that we bring. So that we are essential. And if you wouldn't dare think about cutting that team. So, you have to be proving it every day, because if you're a cost center, what did you do for me yesterday? It's as good as, the value you delivered yesterday. So you have to always be thinking about that. And not just within the product team, right? So what is the value the team provides at a quarterly business review? If there's annual planning, quarterly planning, continuous planning, who's owning that? And,
Hmm.
I see, as you mentioned, like if there's someone that's more technically focused, that they're thinking about tools, in the same vein, who's thinking about getting all of these decision-making forums going? No one, right? So it's like either kind of happens casually or haphazardly. Product operations make sure that these sort of decision-making cadences are happening.
Yes, one of course, Annabella. She's also a dear friend. I mean, she was a speaker last year
Hmm.
as well. And one of the things that I understand specifically from her case is that you know, they started Out Systems is the name of the company. I mean, do you have to have a dedicated person, or can you leave at least in the beginning of the role with a part-time person? So it's maybe half-time PM, half-time product ops for the team, or better yet, how do you get there? Right?
Hmm.
What is the go-to case to, oh, we're going to get this PM and he's transitioning towards a product ops role. So how do you see this in practice in the
Hmm.
companies that you have been working with?
Well, Andre, I'm going to be speaking about that at Productized in early
Hmm.
October.
Okay.
But it's a good way to think about standing up product operations that is sort of low commitment, right? Because you need to
Hmm.
make the case. So, how can you sort of either, first of all, you need to highlight the gaps and opportunities, what that outcome could look like if it was enabled or filled or whatever. Um, and then start making the case for a proof of concept, right? And then that proof of concept can include, like, let's say we have Jose. He is great at kind of getting us structured with how we're road mapping, and he really enjoys systems thinking. I propose that we, reallocate 40%, 30% of Jose's time towards getting us set up with a plan for road mapping, assessing if we actually need a tool, talking with our stakeholders and understanding where are we doing well, where are we falling down in terms of making sure they feel part of the process, and identifying those quick wins, showing those
Hmm.
back, and then having sort of an agreement of, like, green light. If we can get this solved, we could get this much more solved if we got 60% of Jose's time in. You just kind of start doing that. So either you have a converted internal headcount, you got to make the case to replace them, right? And you sort of start building from there. And they feel, your manager, the executive team, they feel better that it's not a head count that they're committing to. That scares people, right? that new head count, net new. So it's a way to provide comfort and then also really show through that proof of concept the value.
All right. We don't want to unveil too much
Right.
of what your workshop and so could be at the conference at Productized but conference, but still, I think this is a good sneak peek what people can expect.
Yeah.
Um, all right. So Denise, let's just maybe go into more of a perspective modes with this, super rapid evolution, technology, markets. Some
Hmm.
people even say strategy is going to get a little bit obsolete. There's pandemics and there's wars. There's China. There's political turmoils. What are the what are your own personal strategies for staying updated with current industry trends and emerging
Mm.
practices in the product space?
It's really about listening and reading and being open. And it's amazing how much conferences actually generate energy and ideas and that sense of community. I spoke at one in upstate New York a few weeks ago, and the amount of information and ideas shared, and I ended up sitting next to someone who gave me some advice on a client that was sort of struggling with using AI within their insights
Hmm.
database. So that was interesting. So reading and listening, I get a lot of information from LinkedIn. So people like Jeff Gofelf, who just wrote a new OKRs
Yeah.
book, I find a lot of value from him. Stephanie, I'm going to mess her last name up. Stephanie Luya
Yeah.
from
Stephanie
Doodle.
Loya.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's been doing more thought leadership. Lenny's podcast, Lenny's newsletter, I find that really valuable. And then listening, I like the Lenny's podcast. I like Melissa's Perri's product thinking podcast. And then one
Mm-hmm.
that's a little more general that I get sort of a more macro view is Pivot, that
Mm-hmm.
is done by Kara Swisher, who's a tech journalist, and Scott Galloway, who's a
Yeah.
kind of an investor. Yeah. So listening and reading and conferences.
All right. So looking ahead, what kind of skills or knowledge areas have you seen or do you believe at the moment are the most critical for product managers to focus in the coming years?
Yes. Financial acumen, no doubt.
Financial acumen?
Yes. If
Hmm.
you want to get to that CPO stage, you have to understand the financials. Doesn't mean that you are creating a P&L from scratch, a profit and
Mm-hmm.
loss statement, but can you read it? Do you understand what it's telling you? Can you model out projections, potentials, opportunities, this or that kind of decisions? GIF Constable has a class, financial fluency for product leaders. I audited it. It is like high level. It's like you get in there. It's almost for like CPO level folks. He just
Mm-hmm.
introduced another one, I believe, that is a little more entry level about financial modeling, and it's on Maven. It's pretty inexpensive. I think when I talk to product managers and speak to their bosses, and they're like, we really want to move them up, but they don't have a commercial sensibility. So don't be allergic to learning the commercials, right? You have to be a full stack product manager. You have to be strategic, operational, tactical, but also you have to have a good grasp of the commercial. So I think having to develop that, I think, is huge. That would be one. And then, the data literacy and analytics. So, um, data driven decision making, storytelling with data, proficiency in using analytics tools. How do you leverage AI and machine learning in a way that is additive to product management and what you do versus using it as a strategy? And I'm seeing that a lot now where companies like AI's our strategy. Great, that's a tool to the end. What is the strategy? So understanding where it applies and being able to push back and say, AI is not a strategy manager. Let's talk about how it could enable that. So
Mm-hmm.
those are two areas, I think.
Okay. And before we wrap up, is there any specific recommendations? I think you have, of course, talked about financials for product managers
Mhm.
course, which is on Maven, and we'll try to put it on the show notes.
Yeah, I'll send some links.
Is there any books or any other resources you would recommend?
Well, Product Operations, the book, certainly.
All right,
Um,
that one we have here.
yes, but one that I really found so much value out of, someone I know who works at a offshore development firm based in South America. I was
Hmm.
working with a client. I'm like, my client, they're moving all of their development in house, and I was leading a workshop for them on sort of making that adjustment. And he made the recommendation of the culture map. It's by Aaron
Yes.
Meyer. Do you know it?
Yeah,
Oh,
I know it. I know that one.
fantastic! So good. How different cultures accept feedback, give feedback, what is sort of the unsaid, unwritten, sort of between the lines, as we say. So I found that really helpful. I have the Phoenix Project on my bookshelf by Jean Kim, but I haven't read it yet. Everyone I talk to loves it. That's been around for a while. So, and then finally, Burn Book, which is by Kara Swisher, and it's called a tech, a love story, and basically it's the history of tech from
Oh.
sort of a West Coast Bay Area point of view. But I feel like
Hmm.
if you understand the history, we know where we're going. So I find it really useful and insightful. I'm halfway through that right now.
It's called the Burn Book.
BURN, Burn Book. I'll send you a link.
Okay. Amazing. For those who want to maybe continue this conversation, just reach out for advice or maybe consultancy, where can I find you?
I have a website. You can go to my website. It's DeniseTilles.com, DeniseTilles.com, or LinkedIn is fine too. I get lots of questions and outreach there as well.
Hmm. And of course, if you're coming to the Productized conference, feel free to reach out and say
Please,
hi to
yeah.
Denise.
Yeah, I would love to meet everybody. I'm very excited to come.
Is it going to be your first time in Portugal?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I hope you enjoy it. I'm pretty sure you will. Denise, it was a real pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
And we're looking forward to have you with us.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye. Have a great day.
Bye.